My daughter-in-law rolled her white suitcase to the front door, looked me up and down, and said, "Keep the house clean while we're gone," as if I were the woman she had hired instead of the woman whose name was still on the mailbox. She said it with a smile, though. That was the part that stayed with me. Not the words themselves, but the way Lauren Whitaker smiled while saying them, bright and polished, the same smile she used at church luncheons and charity auctions when she wanted people to believe she had a generous heart. I was standing in my own kitchen that Friday morning, holding a damp dish towel, wearing the blue cardigan my late husband Robert had bought me on our last anniversary. The house smelled faintly of coffee and lemon cleaner. Old Seethy, Daniel was loading their luggage into the SUV, pretending not to hear anything through the open front door. My son had become very good at not hearing things. Lauren placed a folded sheet of paper on the counter and tapped it twice with one manicured finger. "I made a little list," she said. "Nothing difficult. Just basic things. The guest room sheets need changing, the floors could use a real cleaning, and please don't leave your things all over the living room while we're away. Some neighbors may stop by to pick up a package, and I don't want the house looking neglected." She paused before that last word, as if she had chosen the polite version of what she really meant. He looked at the paper. He did not pick it up yet. At 68 years old, I had learned that a woman can lose a great deal in silence without anyone noticing. A husband. A place at the dinner table. The right to be asked before things are changed. But there is a different kind of silence, though. The kind that listens. The kind that remembers. The kind that waits. "We'll be in Aspen until Sunday night," Lauren continued, adjusting the silk scarf around her neck though it was already perfect. "Daniel needs the break. We both do." She glanced around the kitchen, my kitchen, with the kind of tired disappointment people reserve for hotel rooms that fail to meet their standards. "And Margaret, please don't go into my office. I have everything organized. Exactly how I like it. My office." She meant Robert's old study. The room where he used to sit with a cup of black coffee and read the Charleston paper every morning before sunrise. The room where he kept our tax folders, his fountain pens, and the little brass clock that had belonged to his father. Lauren had moved in a white desk, hung abstract prints on the walls, and started calling it hers less than 6 months after Robert was buried. Daniel came in then, carrying Lauren's smaller suitcase, his eyes moving quickly from her face to mine and then away again. "Mom, you okay here for the weekend?" he asked, but the question had no weight behind it. I already knew the answer he wanted. "Yeah, manage," I said. Lauren gave a small laugh. "Of course you will. It's just keeping house." She leaned toward me and kissed the air near my cheek, close enough for the perfume to reach me but not close enough for warmth. Then she walked out, heels clicking across the hardwood floors Robert and I had saved 3 summers to refinish. Daniel hesitated at the door. For 1 second, I saw the boy who used to run into this kitchen with grass stains on his jeans and ask me for peanut butter sandwiches. Then Lauren called his name from the driveway, and that boy vanished. A gave me a weak smile. "See you Sunday, Mom." The SUV pulled away a minute later, gravel crunching under the tires, Lauren waving through the passenger window like a queen leaving behind servants. He stood at the front door until the car disappeared around the bend of our quiet South Carolina street. Then I shut the door. The whole house settled around me. No television from their bedroom. No sharp footsteps from Lauren. No Daniel murmuring apologies he never finished. Just the old walls, the grandfather clock, and my own breathing. I went back to the kitchen and picked up Lauren's list. Her handwriting was neat, elegant, and cool in the way only careful handwriting can be. Wipe down counters. Back dumpsters. Polished dining table. Remove old clutter from living room. Do not touch office. I read that last line 3 times. Do not touch office. A small thing, maybe. A normal request, someone else might say. But after 3 years of being moved aside inch by inch, I had learned that people reveal themselves most clearly by what they try to keep locked away. He folded the paper once, then again, and placed it beside my coffee cup. Lauren thought she had left me with chores. She had no idea she had just given me 4 quiet days inside the house she thought she controlled. For several minutes, I did not move from the kitchen. I listened to the quiet the way a person listens after a storm, checking what has been broken without turning on all the lights at once. The house on Waverley Lane had never been grand, not in the way Lauren liked to use that word, but it had bones, as Robert used to say. Solid oak floors. White windows. A brick fireplace that smoked a little if the wind came from the east. A backyard with 2 live oaks and a strip of garden where I still planted rosemary every spring. Robert and I bought it when Daniel was 4 years old, back when the roof leaked over the laundry room and the upstairs bathroom had yellow tile from another decade. We did not complain. We painted on weekends. We saved receipts in a shoebox. We ate tomato soup and grilled cheese for dinner so we could afford new gutters before hurricane season. Every corner of that house had passed through my hands before Lauren ever stepped across the threshold. He knew which stair creaked in July humidity. He knew how to lift the kitchen window when it stuck. He knew the small stain near the pantry where Daniel spilled grape juice in 2nd grade and cried because he thought his father would be angry. Robert only laughed, knelt down with a rag, and told him houses were meant to hold memories, not showroom perfection. Lauren did not understand that. To her, memories were clutter. My framed photos were clutter. Robert's old books were clutter. The quilt my mother made for our wedding was clutter. After Robert passed, she started with little suggestions. Margaret, maybe we should freshen up the living room. Margaret, that chair has seen better days. Margaret, the house feels a little dated, do you not think? At first, I let it happen because grief had made me tired. I mistook surrender for peace. Plast. The floral curtains I had sewn myself with pale gray panels that made the room look like a waiting area. She took down family photographs and said she was creating clean lines. She packed Robert's fishing trophies into a plastic bin and told me Daniel could sort through them later. Letter never came. Then came the bedroom. Lauren said the stairs were probably too much for me at my age, though I still carried laundry baskets up and down without trouble. She said the smaller room near the back of the house would be cozier for me. Daniel stood beside her and nodded, looking at the floor. That was how I ended up sleeping in what used to be the sewing room, while Lauren and Daniel took the primary bedroom Robert and I had shared for 37 years. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself families made adjustments. But standing in the kitchen that Friday morning, with Lauren's list folded beside my coffee, I finally allowed myself to say the truth silently. He had not been adjusted. He had been reduced. He walked through the hallway slowly, touching the walls as I passed. The house felt different without them in it. Not empty. Relieved. In the living room, Lauren had left 2 wine glasses on the side table from the night before, though her list had instructed me to polish the dining table before Sunday. He washed the glasses. Not because she told me to. Because I refused to let her carelessness define my home. Then I returned the silver-framed photograph of Robert and me to the mantel, the one Lauren had hidden behind a stack of design books. In the picture, we were standing outside the county courthouse on our 25th anniversary, laughing at something I could no longer remember. His hand rested lightly on my shoulder. He looked at it for a long time. You would not have let this happen, I whispered. Then I corrected myself, because Robert had always hated self-pity. No. Joe would have reminded me that I do not need permission to stand in my own house. By noon, sunlight had filled the front room, warm and gold across the floors. I made myself a turkey sandwich, poured iced tea into a tall glass, and sat at the kitchen table instead of eating over the sink the way I had begun doing after Lauren moved the breakfast chairs she disliked into the garage. The list remained beside me. I unfolded it again. Back jumpsters. Police table. Remove old clutter. Do not touch office. That last line pulled at me like a loose thread. He had lived long enough to know that rules made in a frightened voice are rarely about order. They are about hiding something. I finished my lunch, washed my plate, dried my hands, and walked toward Robert's old study at the end of the hall. The door was closed. Lauren always kept it closed now. He stood there with my hand near the knob, not opening it yet. Just listening. A house remembers what people try to erase. And that afternoon, for the first time in years, I was ready to let mine speak. He did not open the study door right away. I went back to the kitchen first and read Lauren's list from top to bottom, not as a set of chores, but as a map of what she believed I was allowed to touch. Counters. Floors. Stairs. Guest room. Dining table. Living room. Never the office. That was how people like Lauren worked. They gave orders softly enough to sound reasonable, then built invisible fences around anything that mattered. He placed the list flat on the table and smoothed it with my palm. Her handwriting looked almost pretty in the afternoon light. He wondered how many ugly intentions in the world had been written in beautiful penmanship. The first task said to remove old clutter from the living room, so I began there. I picked up the stack of glossy design magazines Lauren kept on the coffee table and placed them in a basket. Underneath them, I found Robert's old church directory, the one with his neat notes in the margins beside names of people he meant to call when they were sick or newly widowed. Lauren had hidden it there, under pages of white kitchens and million-dollar patios. He set it beside his photograph on the mantel. Then I opened the cabinet below the bookshelves and found more of my things pushed into the back: Daniel's clay handprint from kindergarten, my mother's recipe box, a Christmas ornament with Robert's handwriting on the tag. Not trash. Not clutter. Evidence of a life. I dusted each one carefully and returned them to the shelves where they belonged. With every small object I restored, the room began to look less like Lauren's showroom and more like home. Still, the study waited at the end of the hallway. I could feel it the way you feel a closed door in a quiet house. By 3 o'clock, I had vacuumed the stairs, wiped the counters, changed the guest room sheets, and polished the dining table until I could see the window reflected in the wood. He had done everything Lauren asked except the one thing she warned me not to do. That was when my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Hope everything is okay, ma'am. Lauren says do not forget the package on Saturday." He stared at those words for a long moment. "Nope, how are you feeling?" "Nope, are you lonely in the house by yourself?" Just another reminder delivered through my son's phone with my Dauterin Lavese fingerprints all over it. I typed, "Everything is fine," then set the phone face down. Fine had become the safest lie in my family. I walked to the small drawer beside the pantry where Robert used to keep spare keys, batteries, and twist ties he insisted might be useful someday. Most of the keys were gone. Lauren had cleaned that drawer last spring. Back behind the loose roll of masking tape, my fingers touched something cold and familiar. A brass key with a tiny red mark of nail polish near the top. Robert had put that mark there years ago because I kept mixing up the study key with the shed key. He held it in my palm and felt my throat tighten, not with sadness exactly, but with the strange comfort of being remembered by someone who was no longer there. Lauren could replace curtains and move furniture and call rooms by new names, but she had not known about this key. She had not known everything. He went back down the hall. The study door looked different now, not forbidden, just closed. He slid the key into the lock. It turned easily. For a second, I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because Lauren had built so much authority around a door that still opened for me. The room smelled faintly of printer paper and the vanilla candle she burned to cover the old scent of Robert's pipe tobacco. Her white desk sat where his walnut one used to be. Her laptop was gone, taken on the trip, but the drawers remained. He did not rush. He did not rummage wildly like a thief. I walked to the filing cabinet by the window, the same cabinet Robert and I bought from an office supply store outside Charleston in 1998. The top drawer held labeled folders, landscaping, insurance, receipts, holiday cards. The second drawer was locked, but not well. The same brass key opened it too. Inside, behind a folder marked paint samples, was a yellow envelope with my name written on the corner in Lauren's handwriting. Not Margaret. Used to me I sat down slowly in the chair that was too sleek and too low for comfort. My hands were steady when I opened it. The first page was an email printed from a real estate agent thanking Lauren for her interest in a confidential market evaluation. The second was a list of comparable homes within 5 miles, each one circled in blue ink. The third page was worse. 3 assisted living communities, all at least 40 minutes away, with notes beside them. Quiet. Affordable. A bailable zone. At the bottom of the page, Lauren had written one sentence so casually it chilled the room around me. Daniel will agree once Margaret is out. I read that sentence again, slower the second time, because part of me wanted it to become less cruel if I gave it more time. Daniel will agree once Margaret is out. Not once Mom is comfortable. Not once we talk to her. Not once we ask what she wants. Out. One small word, written in blue ink, sitting at the bottom of a page like a final decision already made without me in the room. I placed the paper on the desk and looked around Robert's study. Lauren had made it pale and expensive, but if I looked past her things, I could still see him there. His reading glasses used to sit by the window. His old radio used to hum with baseball games on summer evenings. He kept a jar of peppermints on the shelf for Daniel, even after Daniel was grown and had stopped reaching for them. That room had held taxes, birthday cards, mortgage papers, and late-night talks when Robert and I worried about bills. But never about whether our son loved us. I leaned back in Lauren's chair and let the silence settle. He did not cry. Theirs would have made sense years ago, when Lauren first began moving my belongings without asking. When Daniel stopped coming by alone. When I noticed my place at the dinner table had shifted from beside my son to the far end near the kitchen door. But this was different. This was not thoughtlessness. This was a plan. He took each page from the yellow envelope and laid them in a neat row on the desk. Real estate evaluation. House comparisons. Assisted living communities. A handwritten note about getting me out. Then I noticed another folded sheet tucked inside the back of the envelope. It was a printed message chain, probably something Lauren had meant to shred and forgotten. The words were clipped, practical, almost bored. She had written to the agent that the property would be easier to show once the elderly occupant had been relocated. Elderly occupant. He almost smiled at that. 37 years of marriage, 32 years of mortgage payments, every Thanksgiving turkey, every scraped knee, every storm window Robert and I installed with our own hands, and in Lauren's language I had become an elderly occupant. I folded my hands in my lap and stared at the wall where Robert's bookshelves used to be. For a moment, I heard his voice as clearly as if he were standing behind me. Maggie, do not let anybody make you smaller just because they speak louder. He had called me Maggie when he wanted me to remember who I was before life made me careful. He gathered the papers and slid them back into the envelope, but I did not return it to its hiding place. I carried it to the kitchen and set it beside Lauren's cleaning list. The two documents looked strange together, one pretending to be about housekeeping, the other revealing what the house was really being cleaned for. He made a fresh cup of coffee though it was late afternoon. My hands did not shake. That surprised me. Grief had made them shake. Loneliness had made them shake. But truth has a way of steadying a person when it finally stops hiding. He opened the drawer under the telephone and pulled out my old address book. Most people keep numbers in phones now, but I still trusted paper. Robert used to tease me for it, then ask me where he had written something down. He turned the pages until I found Helen Carter. Ellen and I had known each other since our boys played Little League at Hampton Park. She had worked for M.A. Regis, the attorney who handled Robert's estate, before she retired. We had not spoken much lately, mostly birthday cards and Christmas notes, because shame makes a person quiet. He had not wanted anyone to know how small my life had become inside my own house. He dialed before I could talk myself out of it. Helen answered on the third ring, her voice warm and a little breathless. Margaret. My goodness, it is good to hear your voice. He looked at the yellow envelope on the table. Ellen, I said, calm enough that I almost did not recognize myself. I need to ask you something about Robert's papers. And I need you to be honest with me. There was a pause. The kind of pause that tells you someone already knows the question matters. Tell me what happened, she said. Edith. Not all of it. Not the years of quiet humiliations, not the bedroom, not the missing photographs. Just the envelope, the real estate agent, the facilities list, and Lauren's note. Ellen did not interrupt once. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. Margaret, do you still have the blue folder Robert left in the fire safe? He turned toward the hallway closet where the safe sat under a stack of old blankets. Yes. Then do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything. And do not tell Lauren what you found. Her voice had changed. It was still Helen, but sharper now, like a kitchen knife pulled from a drawer. Robert was worried about this before he passed. I made arrangements. I closed my eyes. For the first time that day, the room seemed to tilt toward hope. What kind of arrangements? I asked. Ellen lowered her voice. The kind your daughter-in-law will wish she had known about before she tried to sell your home. Ellen told me to bring the blue folder to her house before sunset, and for the first time in a long while, I did exactly what someone advised because I trusted the art behind the advice. The fire safe was in the hallway closet, pushed behind winter coats Lauren said made the entryway look crowded. I knelt carefully, turned the dial to Robert's birthday, then mine, then Daniel's, the same combination we had used for 20 years. The safe opened with a low click that sounded louder than it should have in the quiet house. Inside were insurance papers, birth certificates, our marriage license, Robert's military discharge form, and the blue folder Helen had mentioned. His handwriting was on the tab. Maggie, house documents. Not Margaret. Not Mom. Maggie. I pressed my thumb over the letters for 1 second before placing the folder in my tote bag beside Lauren's yellow envelope. Ellen lived 15 minutes away in a small brick ranch near James Island, with wind chimes on the porch and geraniums lined up in clay pots. When she opened the door, she did not greet me with pity. That was one of the reasons I had always liked her. She simply took my hand, squeezed it once, and said, "Come into the kitchen." I made tea. Her kitchen looked lived in, not staged. A grocery list on the refrigerator. A basket of folded towels on a chair. A chipped mug beside the sink. It comforted me more than I expected. I sat at her round table and placed both folders between us. Helen put on her reading glasses and began with Robert's blue folder first. She moved slowly, carefully, like someone handling something sacred. After a few minutes, she looked up. "Margaret, this is exactly what I thought." I waited. Robert transferred the house into a revocable trust before he passed. You are the primary beneficiary and the sole residential rights holder. Daniel is listed only as a future beneficiary after your lifetime, and even that is conditional. The words were legal, but their meaning came through cleanly. So Daniel cannot sell it? I asked. Ellen shook her head. No. And Lauren has no authority at all. Noni. I looked down at my hands. They were folded on the table, the same way I used to fold them during church when the sermon struck too close to something private. Robert never told me. Ellen's face softened. He did not want to frighten you. But I was worried Daniel was becoming too easy to influence. I came into the office about 8 months before he passed and said he needed to make sure you could never be pressured out of your home. He turned my face toward the window. Outside, Ellen's bird feeder swayed gently in the warm evening air. For 3 years, I had wondered whether Robert would have been disappointed in me for letting the house change so much. Now I realized he had known I might need protection before I knew it myself. That kind of love does not announce itself. It waits in a folder until the day you need it. Helen opened Lauren's yellow envelope next. With each page, her mouth tightened. She read the message about the elderly occupant twice. Then she removed her glasses and set them on the table. This is not just rude, Margaret. This is documentation of intent. She contacted an agent about property she has no right to sell and made plans around removing you from your legal residence. He felt no victory yet. Only a strange, heavy calm. What do I do? Helen reached across the table and tapped Robert's blue folder. First, we call Amy Reales Monday morning, but I am also going to leave him a message tonight. Second, you make copies of everything. Third, you do not confront Lauren alone. People who rely on control do not like losing it in private. They twist the story before anyone else hears the truth. He nodded because I knew exactly what she meant. Lauren could make a room believe she was wounded before anyone asked who held the knife. Daniel is coming back Sunday night, I said. With her. Ellen studied me for a moment. Then Daniel needs to see the truth before she explains it away. That sentence stayed with me during the drive home. The sun was low over the marsh, turning the water gold, and for the first time in months I noticed the beauty of the road instead of driving through it like a ghost. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was waiting, quiet and patient. I carried the folders inside and placed them on the dining table Robert and I had bought with a tax refund in 1991. Then I opened my phone and wrote one message to Daniel. Your father left papers. About the house. You need to come home tomorrow morning without Lauren. This is important. I read it once, sent it, and turned the phone face down. Then I walked into the living room, took Lauren's design books off the mantel, and put Robert's photograph back in the center where it belonged. Daniel did not answer my message for 43 minutes. Because I sat at the kitchen table with the phone beside my hand and watched the minute change on the little clock above the stove. He did not call. He did not send another message. He had spent too many years chasing small scraps of attention from my own son, then pretending those scraps were enough to make a meal. At last, the screen lit up. Mom, what papers? Is everything okay? He could almost hear Lauren beside him, asking why I was texting, asking whether I needed something, asking in that sweet tight voice that made concern sound like an accusation. He typed slowly. Everything is okay. Come alone tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock. Then I turned the phone off completely. That small act felt larger than it should have. Lauren could not reach through the screen now. She could not dress my worry in her words before I had a chance to speak. The next morning, I woke before sunrise, the way I always had when Robert was alive. The bedroom near the laundry room was dim and cramped, but I no longer looked at it as my place. He looked at it as a temporary corner where I had been stored. He made my bed, put on a cream blouse and navy slacks, and pinned my silver hair back neatly. Not for Daniel. Not for Lauren. For myself. Then I walked down the hall to the primary bedroom. The door was open. Lauren's perfume still hung faintly in the air, mixed with the cold smell of untouched furniture. Their suitcases were gone, but her cosmetic jars covered my old dresser. A velvet bench stood at the foot of the bed where Robert used to keep his work boots. For a moment, I saw myself years earlier, sitting by that window while Robert read the paper beside me, the morning light falling across his shoulder. I did not touch Lauren's things. Not yet. He only opened the curtains. Light entered the room fully, without asking permission. By 8 o'clock, Helen arrived with a folder of copies and a calm face that made the house feel less lonely. She brought Aimé Reales on speakerphone from his office in downtown Charleston. His voice was older than I remembered, but steady. It confirmed what Helen had told me. The trust was valid. My residential rights were clear. No sale, transfer, listing, or forced relocation could happen without my written consent. Mrs. Whitaker, he said, your husband was very specific. This home was to remain yours for as long as you wished to live there. He thanked him, but my voice caught on the last word. Yours. Such a simple word. Such a large thing to have returned to me. At 9:30, I set the dining table with 4 chairs, one for me, one for Helen, one for Daniel, and one left empty for the truth Lauren would eventually have to face. I placed Robert's blue folder in front of my seat and Lauren's yellow envelope beside it. Then I added her cleaning list on top, folded open to the line about the office. Ellen noticed and gave me the smallest smile. You always did have a sense of timing, she said. No, I answered. I just finally understand hers. Daniel pulled into the driveway at exactly 10 minutes after 10. Late, but not by much. He watched from the front window as he stepped out of the car alone, wearing jeans and the gray pullover Lauren had bought him last Christmas. He looked tired. Not vacation tired. Coroner tired. When I opened the door, he tried to smile. Ma'am, Lauren is still at the resort. He told her I needed to come back early for a work thing. He glanced past me and saw Helen at the dining table. His smile faded. What is going on? He stepped aside and let him enter the house where he had grown up. For once, I did not rush to comfort him. He did not offer coffee. He did not soften the room. He needed to feel the weight of walking into a truth he had avoided for too long. Sit down, Daniel, I said. He looked at the folders, then at me. "Ma'am, you are scaring me." He pulled out my chair and sat across from him. "Good," I said quietly. "Maybe fear will make you listen where love did not." Daniel sat down slowly, the way a man sits when he already feels the floor shifting beneath him. He kept his hands on the edge of the table and looked from Helen to me, then to the folders. "Is this about Dad?" he asked. "Partly," I said. "But mostly, it is about what has been happening in this house while you pretended not to see it." His face tightened. "Ma'am, that is not fair." I opened Lauren's yellow envelope and slid the first page across the table. "Read." I glanced at it too quickly. "What is this?" "A market evaluation request for this property. Sent by your wife to a real estate agent." His eyes moved over the page again, slower this time. A crease formed between his eyebrows. "That cannot be right." Lauren was just curious. "We have talked about property values before." Ellen said nothing. She simply placed the second page in front of him, the list of comparable homes within 5 miles. Then the third page, the assisted living communities with Lauren's notes in the margins. Daniel's face lost color in small stages, not all at once. First his mouth tightened. Then his eyes stopped moving. Then he leaned back as if the chair had become uncomfortable. "She said she was researching options in case you ever needed more help," he murmured. He looked at him for a long moment. "Did she tell you?" she wrote, "Daniel will agree once Margaret is out?" I did not answer. Ellen handed him the page. I stared at that sentence as if staring long enough might change the handwriting. "I did not know about this," he said at last. His voice was low. "I swear, Ma'am, I did not know she wrote that." "But you knew I had been moved out of my bedroom." His eyes lifted to mine, then dropped. "You knew my photographs were taken down. You knew Robert's study was no longer called Robert's study. You knew your wife spoke to me like I was a guest who had overstayed." I swallowed. "I thought you were okay with it." He almost laughed, but there was no humor in me. "No, Daniel. You hoped I was quiet enough that you would not have to choose." The room went still. Outside, a lawnmower started somewhere down the street, ordinary life continuing as if mine had not just opened. Itself on the dining table. Helen unfolded the copy of the trust papers and placed them beside Lauren's documents. "Your father protected your mother's right to live here," she said gently but firmly. "This house cannot be sold, listed, or used to pressure her out. Not by you, and certainly not by Lauren." Daniel looked at the trust papers, then at the mantel where Robert's photograph had been returned to its place. For a moment, he looked younger. "Guilty. Frightened. Dad did this." "Your father saw more than you did," I said. "Or maybe he saw what you refused to see." Daniel rubbed both hands over his face. "Lauren told me you were lonely here. She said the house was too much for you. She said you would be safer somewhere with staff, meals, activities." "And did you ask me?" I opened his mouth, then closed it. That silence was the answer. He felt a small ache in my chest, not sharp, but old. The ache of a mother realizing her child had not become cruel overnight. It had become convenient. It had let someone else carry his conscience because it was easier than carrying mine. My phone rang on the sideboard. Lauren's name lit up the screen. Daniel flinched before I did. The sound filled the dining room once, twice, 3 times. He let it ring. Daniel stared at it, then reached toward his pocket, probably feeling his own phone vibrate. "Do not answer," I said. I froze. "Ma'am, she will worry." I folded Lauren's note and set it in front of him again. "No, Daniel. She will wonder whether the story is still hers to control." The ringing stopped. A second later, a message appeared on my screen. "Why is Daniel there? What are you doing?" He turned the phone so Daniel could read it. I looked at the words, and something in his expression changed. "Not enough to fix years. But enough for the first crack." I whispered, "She tracked my location." Ellen's eyes narrowed, but I stayed calm. "Of course she did." He stood and walked to the front window. The house looked bright in the late morning sun. The porch needed sweeping. The roses needed trimming. Ordinary tasks. Mean to choose. Mean to ignore. Mean to do when I pleased. Behind me, Daniel's chair scraped back. What do you want? Me to do, he asked. He turned around. For once, I want you to do nothing before you hear everything. Then I pointed to the empty chair at the table. Lauren is coming home tonight. And this time, she will not walk into a house she controls. She will walk into the truth. By late afternoon, the house no longer felt like it was holding its breath. It felt awake. Ellen stayed with me while Daniel made calls in the living room, his voice low and uneven as he cancelled the rest of his weekend plans and told Lauren he had needed to come back early for a family matter. He could hear her through the phone even from the dining room, not her words, but her tone, sharp enough to cut through walls. Daniel said, "We will talk when you get here," and then, after a long pause, "No, Lauren. Not over the phone." That was the first time in years I had heard my son refuse her something. It did not repair what he had allowed, but it changed the air. While we waited, I did what Lauren had asked. Eat clean. Not the way she meant it. He took her grey throw pillows off the sofa and put back the quilt my mother had stitched by hand. I returned Robert's books to the lower shelf in the study, where his gardening manuals and old history volumes belonged. I moved Lauren's decorative bowl of white stones from the dining table and placed the blue glass vase Robert bought me in Savannah for our 30th anniversary in its place. He did not damage her things. He boxed them carefully and labeled each one. Guest room. Office decor. Primary bedroom accessories. There was dignity even in removing what did not belong. Daniel watched from the doorway once, his hands in his pockets. "Mum," he said softly, "I did not realize how much of you was gone from here." He kept folding tissue paper around a silver picture frame. "You would have, if you had looked." I had no answer for that. Near 6 o'clock, Alice arrived in person, wearing a dark suit and carrying a leather folder. I apologized for coming on a Saturday, then said Robert had been one of the finest men he had ever represented. He believed him because he did not say it loudly. Honest. Respect does not need volume. Together, we arranged the papers on the dining table, the trust documents, the printed emails, the list of facilities, Lauren's handwritten note, and finally her housekeeping list. Ellen suggested putting that one away, but I shook my head. No. That is where this began. At 7:13, headlights swept across the front windows. Daniel stood. He remained seated. The engine shut off, and a car door closed hard enough to announce irritation before Lauren even reached the porch. Her heels clicked up the steps. Then came the keypad beeping once. Twice. A pause. Another beep. The code no longer worked. He had changed it that afternoon with the security company while Daniel stood beside me and watched. The doorbell rang. Not once, but 3 times, fast. He walked to the entryway slowly. Daniel moved as if to follow, but I held up one hand. "Let me open my door." Lauren stood on the porch in a cream travel coat, sunglasses pushed on top of her head, her blonde hair still perfect from the resort. Behind her sat the hired car she must have taken from the airport. Her smile appeared before her patience did. "Margaret," she said, stretching my name like it had inconvenienced her. "Why is the code changed?" He looked at her suitcase, then at her face. "Because the house needed cleaning." For 1 second, she did not understand. Then she saw past my shoulder. She saw Daniel standing in the hallway, not beside her. She saw Helen at the dining table. She saw Alice with his folder open. And finally, she saw the documents spread neatly across the polished wood. Her eyes moved fast. So fast. From the yellow envelope to the trust papers to the list she had left for me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. That was the first honest thing I had ever seen Lauren do. He stepped aside. "Come in," I said. "We saved you a chair." She walked into the foyer as if the floor had changed beneath her feet. Her gaze landed on the mantel, where Robert's photograph was back in the center, then on the boxed items stacked by the hallway. "What is all this?" she asked. Daniel answered before I could. The truth. Lauren turned to him quickly, already reaching for the version of herself that always worked. Soft eyes. Hit voice. Confusion polished into innocence. Daniel, I do not know what your mother has told you, but this is clearly a misunderstanding. He walked to the dining table and picked up her handwritten note. He did not raise my voice. He did not need to. You asked me to clean the house, Lauren, I said. So I did. He started with the lies. Lauren stared at the note in my hand as if it belonged to someone else. That was how people like her survived being exposed. They separated themselves from their own words and waited for everyone else to become uncertain. I was trying to help, she said, turning first to Daniel, not to me. Your mother has been overwhelmed. This house is too large for her, and you know that. He only made a few calls to understand our options. Our options, I repeated quietly. About my home. Ellis adjusted his glasses and looked at her with the professional calm of a man who had spent 40 years watching people mistake confidence for authority. Whitaker, the property is held in trust. Margaret Whitaker has sole residential rights. No listing, sale, transfer, or relocation decision can be made without her written consent. Lauren's smile flickered. I never listed anything. Ellen slid the printed email across the table. You requested a confidential market evaluation and referred to Margaret as an elderly occupant who would be relocated. Lauren's face changed then. Not dramatically. Just enough. A tightening around the mouth. A blink held too long. The smallest retreat of a woman realizing the room was no longer hers to manage. Daniel picked up the page with the assisted living communities and stared at the notes written beside them. You told me Mom wanted to downsize someday, he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried farther than shouting would have. You told me she was too proud to admit it. Lauren reached for his arm. Daniel, I was protecting you from the stress. You were exhausted. Your mother leans on you for everything. A stepped back before her hand touched him. The movement was small, but it shifted years. Lauren noticed. So did I set her cleaning list. On top of the stack. I leaned on my son because I thought I still had one, I said. Daniel closed his eyes. For a moment, he looked as if he had been struck by memory, not by me. Maybe he saw the kitchen table where I helped him with spelling words. Maybe he saw Robert teaching him to change a tire in the driveway. Maybe he saw all the times he had chosen silence because silence cost him less. When he opened his eyes again, they were wet, but he did not reach for sympathy. Good. Sympathy would have been too easy. Mom, he said, I am sorry. He believed he meant it. He also knew sorry was a beginning, not a repair. You will have time to decide what kind of man you want to be, I told him. But you will not decide it by letting someone else speak for you. Ellis then placed a formal letter on the table. It stated, in plain language, that Lauren had no legal authority over the house, that any further attempt to represent herself as having such authority would be documented, and that my private residence was not to be shown, evaluated, or discussed with outside parties without my written approval. Lauren read it quickly, her cheeks flushed. This is humiliating, she whispered. He looked at her the way she had looked at me that morning, measuring not my age, but my usefulness. No, I said. Humiliation is being handed a chore list in your own kitchen. This is accountability. The room went quiet after that. Not peaceful, not yet, but clean in a way I could feel. Daniel told Lauren they would stay at a hotel that night. She argued at first, softly, then sharply, then with tears polished into performance, but no one moved toward her. Not Daniel. Not Ellen. Not Ellis. Not me. By 9 o'clock, her boxes from the hallway were in the trunk of the hired car, along with her suitcase and the decorative things she had used to cover my life. Daniel paused on the porch before leaving. Can I come by tomorrow? He asked. To talk. He stood in the doorway under the yellow porch light Robert had installed himself. You may come, I said. But you will knock. In Nadit, and for once, he understood the difference. After they left. Alan helped me carry my quilt upstairs to the primary bedroom. He did not move everything back that night. Some things deserve to return slowly. I placed Robert's photograph on the dresser, opened the window an inch, and let the Charleston night air drift in. The house was not spotless. There were boxes in the hall, dust on the baseboards, and a porch that still needed sweeping. But for the first time in years, there was no lie standing in the middle of it. Lauren had told me to keep the house clean. So I did. I cleaned out the pretending. He cleaned out the fear. And when I turned off the light in the room Robert and I had shared, I finally understood that a home is not protected by locks, papers, or walls alone. It is protected the moment the woman inside it remembers it was never someone else's to take.